Yeah, I was talking about the CBO, 1.9 trillion federal budget deficit for 2025.
Ouch.
See, I was trying to explain what the CBO does. It works at the pleasure of Congress to come up with all sorts of, interesting things that people,
Well, most importantly, it's supposed to be nonpartisan.
Supposed to.
Yeah, and they are much better, than when the current administration releases information and data. CBO is much better, much more accurate.
All right. And so with this 1.9 trillion, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that the interest payments alone are going to be close to more money than what we're spending, on a lot of things that the government has in its budget. And it's going to become progressively difficult to manage the interest payments without having to raise more capital by selling more bonds or printing more money. And what I'm afraid of is that the more of this that we do, the weaker people are going to see our economy, and they're going to become concerned about our ability to repay our debt, at which point selling bonds becomes progressively more difficult.
No doubt. And now as far as gold goes, it's according to reports out now, it wants to go higher. Why is that?
Well, it's setting record highs almost every week on the back of weakness in foreign currencies and the U.S. dollar. Although the dollar's relative strength against the other world's currency was up a little bit in the past couple of weeks, the fundamental problem that we're experiencing worldwide is a rapid inflation of worldwide currencies. The Bank of England has been stockpiling gold at an incredible pace on the back of a very weak economy going on in England. And what is happening is that a lot of times foreign countries will look for other currencies that maybe look better to them, that they could park their capital in, but everybody's inflating their currency. So by default, central banks worldwide have been accumulating gold at an increasing pace. In fact, they're setting records. So, imagine if we're trying to promote the idea that there's stability in our currency, but nobody buys it. And you can't move to another currency because nobody's looks better. By default, you end up piling up into the gold market in order to have a safe haven and wealth protection and a little diversity. Plus, with these economic slowdowns that are happening like in China and again in Europe, as I mentioned, they're running out of options. So I think they're looking to gold as a source of stability, in the same way that, if you were trying to borrow money from a friend and you write them a Dave Krieger IOU and, there's some mutual friend that you both have and one friend says, hey, I owe you money. Can I pay you with Dave's IOU? Well, the second guy, if he believes in you, might accept that. But if you continue to try to play that game, at some point, your friends might say, well, I don't believe in Dave's ability to make that IOU good. So I'm going to become more hesitant to let him borrow more money from me. And this is the problem that the United States faces, is that the larger these deficits and debts become, the greater our need to try to raise capital from a variety of sources. I'm sure you've noticed how aggressive President Trump has been about trying to reduce spending. I mean, he's letting Elon Musk pretty much run amok. I don't know when we voted Elon Musk in, but apparently not only did we get President Trump, but we also have Elon Musk as well.
Yeah, the flight of the billionaires.
Incredible, right?
I got this peace dollar from you, Fred. Man, 1928 peace dollar. And I got it as part of a big roll of coins here, folks.
Beautiful.
Hey, I'm telling you, folks, if you're not stocking up on silver, you need to be right now, which is why we have Fred Dashevsky from U.S. Coin Capital on board. That's uscoincapitaltol.com. And that's where you go to ask questions. And he's got a phone number, 1-800-878-2646. What, you didn't write that down? 1-800-878-2646, uscoincapital.com. Now I'm sounding like a commercial for Fred.
I don't mind.
but we have, the thing is people need to start stocking up. If you haven't made the commitment, you need to do that.
I think there's a fundamental flaw, and this is the real problem. And again, I've been addressing this for the 40 years I've been involved in gold and silver coins, is that the flaw that we have in America now is that we do have an unbacked currency. And that's something people have to accept. Whether they're fans of precious metals or real estate or the stock market or crypto, whatever their thing is, we do face a fundamental problem, and that is that the value of money is subject to change because we don't have sound money. We have fiat money, and that means that when the government runs short, it can simply print more unbacked money to fill these gaps. And with the government running up 36 trillion already in national debt and adding to it, as you mentioned, these large deficits now each year, even interest payments are becoming difficult. So the likelihood that we're going to have to print more money seems, almost 100%. Now, why does that affect people? Because we're flooding a pool that is effectively a supply of goods and services, but we're adding more money into the system faster than we're manufacturing more goods and services. So there's an overflow of capital in paper. And what it does is it's like, I used to make the analogy that if you took your bathtub and a cup of black coffee and poured it into the bottom of the bathtub and then slowly added water, and periodically you would take a cup of the mixture out of the bathtub. Well, it's going to progressively get weaker and weaker in color. So by the time you fill the bathtub, it'll probably look almost clear. And this is the same result as what happens to paper money's value when we print more and more beyond the growth in the economy. I don't believe we're at a point where there's enough potential for economic growth to absorb the amount of money we're printing, because we're just so deep into this hole already. And that leaves people with a fundamental problem that they have to work every week. They have to invest every week. Nobody's handing you tens of thousands of dollars for your expenses. You have to earn and work for that money. And when you do, the problem is if you don't spend it, let's say almost immediately, it slowly begins to lose more of its purchasing power. So you're sort of forced into an odd position where you're working for a dollar, but that dollar is not retaining its value. The reason I've always recommended the gold and silver is it really does act as a counterbalance, because the weaker paper money gets, the more expensive those silver dollars that you have in your hand or any gold coin will become in comparison to that dollar. And I do believe we're going to see this continued go forward at a more rapid pace than what we've experienced up to this point, because the rate the government is blowing through money right now has also accelerated.
So this idea of Trump building casinos and stuff over in Gaza Strip is just like, this is all pure folly. It's not going to happen.
We're taking over Canada, we're taking over Gaza, we're taking over the Gulf of Mexico. I like this. We just arbitrarily say, oh, we own that. That's okay. That used to be yours. Yeah, we're going to take that now. I got to say, if you wanted activity from a new president, we've got it. What was it, 27 executive orders in his first day as president. We've had massive amounts of activity within the economy, and everybody seems to be scrambling because every day President Trump says something that apparently nobody else within his administration knew about. Like this Gaza thing, for example, and started asking people in the State Department and the Treasury and Congress, and they were like, what are you talking about? We haven't heard anything about this. We don't know how this is going to work. What do you mean he's taking over Gaza and America is going to own it? Wait a minute. So it's almost like he's throwing a bunch of crap against the wall. Let's see what sticks. But the idea that they're shaking their things up, I think is great. How this is all going to play out, I mean, we'll have to see how that translates. But I expect that all these things will end up costing an awful lot of money. Now, Elon Musk is trying to take the other approach, which is if you can't raise the capital, by raising our taxes or selling more treasury bonds, the other side of the equation is you reduce government spending. So he's kind of come in with a machete, and he's just slashing everywhere he can go and said, well, I could cut 50 billion here and 10 billion there and 2 billion here and 100 million there. And looking at programs, I think anybody could have done this before. The problem is you also have to have behind it the political backbone. So I could turn around and say to you, okay, this is what you need to do to solve your problems. Let's say you're running deficits and spending more money than you should. And I might say, well, Dave, you're going to have to cut out the golf course stuff, and you're going to have to drop your stuff that you do here and there and start saving money and spend less on your food and, cut down your entertainment. But you may not be willing to do that, which means you're left without a solution. So not only do we have to come up with ideas, but they have to be palatable. And, it's almost unfortunate, but a lot of these ideas that they're talking about in reduction of government spending means reducing services to people. And this is where it gets sticky. So the Democrats are freaking out because the Republicans are saying, well, we have to start cutting these services. And that means these people that were on the government teat, guess what? You're not going to get money anymore. And there's a lot of pushback. So, if I put you in charge and said, okay, what do you slash? What do you want to start cutting? Is it going to be defense spending? Is it going to be spending on public programs? Whose legs are you going to cut off? And politically, that's really difficult. So it's going to be very interesting to watch this going forward.
Now, Adam Data has come out with a rental affordability report that reveals now that owning a home is more affordable than renting a 3-bedroom property in nearly 60% of U.S. counties that they've analyzed.
Right. Except the banks won't make a loan to people who are qualified to pay the rent, apparently, but they don't qualify under the same conditions to take out a mortgage, which to me is a bit bizarre. I mean, I get what the banks are trying to do, which is be extremely conservative about to whom they loan money, which to me is a bit bizarre. I mean, I get what the banks are trying to do, which is be extremely conservative about to whom they loan money. But if a guy is paying $2,000 a month in rent, how come he can't afford a $1,500 mortgage payment? So, we are in a very strange position here where rental income for those that do that has been fantastic. For those that have to rent and pay that rent, it's horrific. And you're right. You're at a point now where people should be able to take out a mortgage and buy a home. At least there, the potential is for the equity of the home to go up in value over the years. And you're not just spending your money frivolously and getting nothing out of it. Because when you rent, you own nothing. So you pay your rent, you pay your rent, you pay your rent. 2 years goes by, what do you have? Zero. You bought a home and you made a mortgage payment. Well, you're knocking down that loan. You're knocking down the intrinsic debt against the value of the equity of the property, and you have an asset that is yours and hopefully over the years becomes more valuable. So it's very strange that we're in this kind of environment where the banks are so hesitant to make loans to people who clearly are paying rent month after month, but the banks won't qualify them to take out a mortgage.
No kidding. And see, I'd be looking at a different bank. If you go in and you fill out a mortgage loan application and they say no, I'd take all your money out of the bank that you have in there and just say, you know what, I'm going to go bank with somebody that will do business with me because you don't want to do business. So speaking of doing business, tell me, what do we got going on for specials right now in the gold and silver market?
On the gold side, I have a group of $10 gold pieces that were struck before the 1930s, and I have both varieties, Indian and Liberty Head, both in mint state 63. So these are uncirculated, mint condition, graded and certified, sealed in the NGC holders, and they generally run around $1,850 or so per coin. And I have a group of these available at $1,750. Anybody who mentions the Dave Krieger show, we will offer that pricing at $1,750. This is as long as supplies last, of course, but it's a great opportunity to buy a mint condition $10 gold coin for under $2,000. And I think it's a great value for people that are either adding from time to time or are first starting. We've had people buy 10 or 20 of these things at a clip, and sometimes people buying literally 1 or 2. But I think it's a great way for people to accumulate. So $10 gold coins, minted prior to 1932, both varieties, the Indian Head and Liberty, I have available. They're actually effectively the same price, and I would offer them to your listeners $1,750. Mint State 63 $10 gold pieces.
Now, for those of you that don't understand Mint State, Fred is a grader. He's one of those official guys out there that could sit there and take a look at a coin and say, hey, this thing is, and you can actually grade the value of that coin as to its condition.
I can, but what I do is I also submit these to a third party. Because what I'd like to have happen is if you're going to acquire a mint condition coin, I would prefer if that quality is not defined by me, the person selling the coin to you, or by somebody who might potentially be looking to buy it. The best way to do this is have an independent third party make that grading assessment. And I use the toughest standard that exists within the coin industry, and that's called NGC. That's the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation of America, NGC. And their holders are sonically sealed, tamper-proof, grading designation, date, and type of coin stamped right on the holder, so there's no way to miss what it is. It makes it perfectly easy for somebody, even as a novice, to know they're getting exactly what they should be getting without the parties involved in the transaction being those that are also grading it. So it's a third-party grading system beyond my own, and that affords me the opportunity to not only use my own eye, but also make it palatable for the person acquiring the coins and recognize they're not just merely taking my opinion. Not that there's any reason they shouldn't, but it's certainly much better if you have a third-party grading on any coin that you buy.
Right. Now, the other thing that Adam Data reported on was about U.S. commercial foreclosures going up.
They are.
This is pretty scary.
You know a lot about that for sure. And, I would suggest that I wonder whether that problem persists because people had taken out loans they couldn't afford, or whether there was some shenanigans going on. But, I imagine a lot of people got stuck in a mortgage that, they simply can't afford to make the payments, and now they're heading into the foreclosure process. So you would think this would affect the real estate market in a negative way. You would think it would drive prices down. We haven't seen that yet. We're still seeing, I know real estate is local, but at least in this neighborhood and everywhere I talk to people so far, prices for residential continue to go up. Commercial, a little different, but the residential market is still thriving. I definitely encourage home ownership to those that can afford it. I'm a big fan of assets that appreciate in value, and borrowing money to buy an asset like that makes perfect sense to me, as opposed to assets that depreciate. Like, for example, if you buy a car, I don't think anybody should finance a car if they can't afford the car outright, because they're losing money consistently each year as the car depreciates in value. So you're borrowing money, paying interest, and you're paying for something that, again, is worth less and less over the years. If you have to do it that way, I get it. But the smarter way to utilize your capital is to buy assets that appreciate. And if you borrow money to do that, I think that makes perfect sense. But I'm surprised we haven't seen more of a downturn in real estate prices, considering the foreclosure problem.
Well, and I think you are going to start seeing it. And the thing is right now, as of December, 726 major businesses got foreclosed on. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, like you said, I think the business went south, that the market stagnated, that people just are tightening their belts. And this is one of the reasons why you need to start investing, because, they've got to do something to shore up the value of the dollar. And this is an ongoing fight, because you've got all these BRICS nations out there that are trying to devalue the dollar and create their own currency to try to destroy the American economy. And the other thing that we've got going on here is Trump basically, and I knew he did this to get a knee jerk out of Canada and Mexico, but now he wants a 25% tariff. And then he turns around after they react, which is what he wanted, as a good negotiator, throwing it onto the table. And now they're saying, we'll tell you what, we'll send 10,000 troops to the border, and we'll nominate a fentanyl czar, and we'll crack down here. Just don't impose those tariffs, because if we get in this trading war. Well, there's another guy out there that owns 7 Grains Natural Market in Talmadge, Ohio, and his name is Dave Krieger.
Really?
Oh man, it came across my my internet stream, and I'm looking at this going, wait a minute. See, he and his wife Gina, they own this fairly large grocery where they deal in a lot of food made from scratch, chicken, macaroni, salad, sub sandwiches and stuff like that. And see, he's freaking out over this tariff proposal, because if that happens with Mexico, the price of avocados will go through the roof. Sure. What else can we expect? You really think he's going to hold him to this?
Well, again, I think you're right about one thing you said, is that he is a negotiator. So he starts with a shot right by your head. He's going to get your attention and say, look, I'm threatening to do X, Y, and Z. And from that point, he has room to, wiggle and say, okay, well, if that's unacceptable, we can drop to this. And anything he does is going to be a move in the right direction, because the trade gaps are obviously quite ridiculous between what we do in terms of accumulating data and accumulating goods and services from foreign countries and what we sell. But, I'm afraid a lot of people are not prepared for the inflationary backwash of what happens with tariffs. And, some people are arguing it's not inflationary. I struggle with that, because, I don't see how in the instance where, if we're going to import goods and services and start charging tariffs to these countries to sell their goods here, well, that's going to raise the price then, and it's going to make it more comparable. So we're going to either knock out the cheaper option, or we're going to force the prices of those items being sold in America to go up. And that naturally is inflationary. Unfortunately, wages, how much people are earning, do not go up at the same rate inflation does. Inflation is much quicker. So it's outpacing the wage increase. No doubt. This is going to become a perpetual problem for people. And, people don't like inflation. It became almost a political issue, and it hadn't been for decades. I mean, it's always mentioned, but it got so bad in the past couple of years, it's getting progressively harder to ignore.
Right.
So
well,
I
we
think people
appreciate
will push back
that
a lot. And that's why I think if we expect inflation, well, then let's prepare for it. Let's buy things that do well in inflationary times, and certainly gold and silver, no pun intended, but they shine during those environments.
Right. Well, I appreciate your input, Fred. We got to go. We're out of time for today's show. In the meantime, God bless you. God bless the United States of America. See you Monday.